Welcome back, everyone, to Afrodo Reviews. Now, for those of you who have followed my channel for a while, you know what this is gonna be, but because I kind of messed up and wasn't able to do it last year, I'm gonna quickly go over what this month is gonna have, because I definitely am gonna do it this month. About 2 years ago, when my channel was on its first year, I found a book of 1950s horror comics. I figured it fit in pretty well with the spooky season we're all in, so I decided to pick it up and read through it. And I found a trove of some great unintentional comedy among what the 1950s used to consider very terrifying. And it's particularly funny because, like I said, you look at some of this stuff and you think, wow, they thought this was scary back then? Because the comic itself advertises that this is the scariest banned comics of the time. So it's particularly fun to read through it during the spooky season and just go ahead and talk about it. So I wanted to do this last year, but those of you who know, I started a new job last year and it's very physically demanding. So I ended up being too exhausted to be able to keep up with the video demand that would require doing this and also the videos I had already promised. So I ended up basically putting it off, and yeah, I had like a long gap at that time where I was barely able to do a video like once every 2 weeks. And I really don't want to do that again this year. So go ahead and keep with me because we're diving into 1950s horror comics. Year 2, technically, but it's also technically year 3. So we're going to say year 2, 1950s horror comic. And which one am I going to start us off with? Well, the first comic we'll be starting off with is The Man Who Lost His Body. Now, the theme of these For You comics, I guess, is sports, I've noticed. So what we'll probably be seeing is a lot of sports-based stories, at least to start. So go ahead and strap in. The comic begins with our narrator. I'm not exactly sure who he's supposed to be. It says Mr. Carswell blog with his post of pre-code horror comics is at the horrors of it all blogspot. So I think this might be him. I'm not sure, or if it was supposed to be like some kind of like Tales of the Crypt kind of guy that was supposed to take over here. But for now, let's get on to the story. I hope you're in a sporting mood for the gory Grand Slam line up of heavy hitters in this bag of 5th inning issue, while Forlock attends to some urgent business at the pitching mound, 6 feet under it to be exact. I've been asked to cover a few bloody bases by stepping up to the plate and leading off. Who else but I would take one for the team by delivering such a creepy curveball straight out of left field as this? Enough! Grab your bats before they fly away. It's time to slay ball. So obviously, if you can't tell, this is going to be a baseball-themed horror story. Did you miss the days when they would make that many puns in the opening of a horror, just anything, horror show, horror novel? They kind of just did it all the time. But anyways, the story we'll be reading today is The Man Who Lost His Body. Rick Des Moines. A lot of people who follow baseball sports pages remember the name. All agreed that he would have been the most outstanding player of all time had he not been tempted by the world beyond and lost his own body. Comerell, Higgins, Darcy, all-time baseball greats? But it's impossible. You're all dead. Dead! The bright arc lights burned down upon the sullen, brooding figure still in the dugout after the other ballplayers had long left the park. Rick Des Moines' arrogance was still evident upon his face. Call me another fumbling bonus baby, would they? I'll show them, and I'll do it my way. I won't listen to Eddie Likes or anyone else. His resentful mind went back to the incident earlier in the evening, when the team manager Eddie Likes yanked him in the crucial moment of the ballgame. You're a show-off, kid! You're trying to impress the crowd with your fireball. You gotta concentrate on control. Pitch for the team! As the snide words were recalled, Rick stood up and with a clenched fist struck frustratedly into the catcher's mitt on the bench. I'll show her. lights went out. The park must be closing down. What's that on the field? So, to cut a long story short here, what Rick Des Moines notices as he's brooding because his coach tells him stop being such a show-off in baseball, he sees that after the lights go out in the stadium, we're never really quite shown which stadium, or told which stadium, at least I don't think we are, but he starts seeing all-time baseball greats playing ball in spectral form. Now, one of the big issues with this comic that I had while reading through it that you're going to obviously notice is, if you don't know baseball, it's not going to work as effectively for you. I mean, you can still read it fine, and it still works as a sort of horror story. But unfortunately, the story kind of just throws names at you and expects you to sort of know who these baseball legends are. And as someone who doesn't follow baseball, it doesn't work well for me. Like I said, you can still follow it pretty well, but names like this, like the names at the very beginning that he brings up, I honestly could not tell you who Carmel, Higgins, or Darcy are when he talks about baseball greats. It's a minor point overall. Again, like I've said twice now, the story still works without it. But if you know baseball, the story probably work a lot better for you. So anyways, he watches them play ball for a bit until one of the batters breaks their bat while playing. Freaked out, he flees from the stadium and is convinced that he must have just had a bad dream. Although, I mean, if you look at that face right there, I mean, yeah, that's a pretty bad dream if you really think about it. I mean, just look at that. Look at that face. Oh my god. That's one of the best things about 1950s, is just seeing the unintentional horror from the art. So anyways, he basically has a nightmare, wakes up in the middle of the night screaming about the spectral baseball players, before eventually comes to the next day. And so, that afternoon, when he made his way to the ballpark for the scheduled game, Rick's mind was once again intent upon his single-minded climb to fame. Only by chance did the voice of the Myth Bat Boy reach him. "Hey, look at this! One of our best bats ruined! I left it away last night before I left, I'm sure! Des Moines, get in there and warm up! Des Moines, where are you going?" It was too much for the rookie's overwrought mind to grasp. He walked the streets for hours, without direction or purpose, trying to reassure himself of his sanity. And then, I've been in a daze. Without knowing it, I headed back to the ballpark. All the lights are out. That's right, no game scheduled for tonight. A ball! As though someone lopped it right over the right field bleachers. His first impulse was to turn tail and run. But then, the young southpaw forced himself to remain calm. He tried to think rationally. They're not bad men. They're all ball players of reputation. No reason why they should hurt me. I'll go and look again. They're probably not even there. There. I knew it. Not a soul. But then, as though out of a still night air, the weird apparitions materialized. Des Moines stared spellbound upon the southpaw in the pitcher's box. There they are now. Oh, the southpaw in the pitcher's box. It's Cy Bolton. They say he was the best ever. No one ever matched his control. If only I had his control. I could toss my fireball from now to kingdom come. I'd pulverize them. In transfixion, the rookie approached the famed Cy Bolton. Inadvertently, he crossed the baseline as a runner headed his way. A cold chill seized him as the phantom figure ran through him. Get away from me! Get away! Oh, boom. So basically after that, he blacks out. The story is, he wakes up. I don't know why he blacks out. It's more or less irrelevant to the story. I guess it just causes the spectral ball players to gather around him and creates an opportunity where, in a panic, he grabs Cy Bolton's arm. And this is where the true horror of the story comes out. It turns out that Des Moines is able to rip pieces of the bodies off these spectral ball players and attach them to his own. After he does that, it takes about 12 hours, and then all of a sudden he has their skill at what they were famous for. With Cy Bolton, it's his control. Later on, he steals another guy's legs, who was one of the fastest in the business, and attaches them. Then, go so on and so forth. As time goes on, he becomes one of the best ball players in the business. Anytime he has something that doesn't quite work, he just goes to the ghost playing at night and basically rips them apart for pieces. However, this comes with a small negative. The sports scribes had a lot to say about the sensational rookie, and all was right in Rick Des Moines' world. That is, until the following Monday. He went in to pitch the night game. Then his blood ran cold. My body! I can see right through it. It's the night. They mustn't see me like this. I can't ever pitch night games. Hey, Des Moines, get back on the mound. Hey, come back! His action almost had him suspended, but he was far too valuable for that. Manager Eddie Likes was ready to accept him, even with his strange idiosyncrasies. But one night, all set, Rick, lights out. No, don't put that light out yet. Oh no, I'm getting out of here. And so Rick became a queer, solitary figure now, withdrawn from his teammates and all those who knew him formerly. His percentages were his life. Just quick reminder here, this is a 1950s comic. Queer literally just means weird in this scenario. That Des Moines kid is a possible all-time great. Maybe the greatest all-around player ever known to baseball. Nah, he's lacking in baseball know-how. Remember old Charlie Simmons? What a brain. What a quick thinker. The brain, eh? I can have that too. Yes, I'll be the greatest of them all. So, Des Moines, in his crazed mode, as you can tell, he's clearly lost his grip on sanity, sneaks into the ball pit one last time, chasing down Charlie Simmons and ripping off his head, attaching the spectral ball player's head to his own, determined to earn his mind. However, this is when the consequences of his actions finally catch up to him. How impatiently he clocked the passing hours. And in a crucial moment of the next day's game, after a council with their catcher, Rick, you gotta be cagey with this guy Dodgeon. Mix him up. Be brainy. Brainy? It's happening now. I can feel the strange sensation in my head, a numbness, an oddly lifeless feeling. Rick's legs braced themselves. His arm wound up for the pitch, and then it happened. A puzzled quiet fell through the crowded stands. What's going on down there? Where's Rick Des Moines? He vanished. Just disappeared. I tell you, I had my eye right on him the whole time. Ugh, there's something crazy about that guy. Something that made me shiver every time I got near him. But that night, after the lights were out in the ballpark, Rick Des Moines pitched the best game of his life. Around him, the phantom figures played their positions. On their blank faces, a knowing smile. So basically, if you can't tell, the premise of the story is basically a guy who became so obsessed with his own fame, hunted down and attacked a group of innocent spectral ball players, to the point that he ended up becoming one of them. He has become one of the greatest pitchers of all time, but few people will ever know that because in his haste, he basically became someone that only plays for himself at night. Not that he would ever know it. So, overall, the story is an interesting one. It is a bit of a misleading title, I'll admit. Rick Des Moines doesn't necessarily lose his body per se, so much as he steals other people's bodies, and ultimately this causes him to reap the rewards of his own action by becoming a ghost among the stadium themselves. I don't know if this means that everything reverts back to normal, where Cy Porter and Charlie Simmons gain back their body parts as Rick Des Moines just basically joins them. But yeah, he basically, it is a nice karmic retribution for what he was doing. Especially as often as the ghosts were like, don't hurt me, I don't want to die kind of thing. And he clearly showed no care for that. He was worried solely about his own fame as opposed to the livelihoods of others. I will say the art is pretty decent this time around. Joking aside from the few scenes that I did point out, overall, it's not bad. You kind of get, like, I pointed out before, this is why it's such a good point, is that the art in this basically collection of comics varies wildly. I think the worst case so far has been the case of the Groping Ghost from 2 years ago, where basically there was this one character, and every time he was on the page, he looked like a completely different person. For the most part, you do see everyone, and they all look the same throughout. There were, like I said, there were a couple points where I was like, ooh, that's kind of weird. And I definitely made fun of them, so I guess I won't harp too much on this. I will admit the story is also a little more clever than the ones I read about 2 years ago. Again, the idea of an up-and-coming arrogant ball player effectively stealing his way to glory and suffering the consequences is pretty nice. But the downside of that is that it's not a very exciting read. The story sort of drags on in several places, and Des Moines' consequences are very minimal until the final pages. he basically just becomes see-through as a main consequence of his actions, but he isn't like losing control of his body or losing feeling in his body. You don't see him saying, he's pitching the best game of his life, but he can't feel his arm anymore. It's like his arm is not his own. You don't really see any of the hints that he's, apart from the going see-through, you don't really see any hints that he's eventually going to become a ghost himself. Or that he's going to become famous off of other people's actions, He just has to avoid being seen at night for most of it until he makes the mistake of becoming all ghost and ultimately dying. So I guess, I don't know, with that being said, I'd give this one about a 5 out of 10. And with that being said, that's the first one of this month. Keep in store. Every Wednesday I'm bringing you a brand new comic to read. Next week's comic, Skin 'em Alive. See you then.